Remember what we're talking about: force, fraud, or coercion. Force, fraud, or coercion, not inconvenience, not threat. They could have walked out any time they wanted. They never called the police. Nobody called the police. Nobody ever. I don't know about you, but if I'm a part of this thing, I'm going to get out. I'm going to say, hey, listen, you better get over there because they're holding all these women. The feds are turning Hollywood excess into organized crime. That's not justice. That's overkill. And the closing message had to have been this. I hope it was. I wasn't there. You may hate the parties. You may hate the drugs. You may hate the fame. You may hate him and hate everybody about him. But that's not your job. Your job is to decide whether the government proved its case beyond and to the exclusion of every reasonable doubt.
They did
beyond
not.
The moral certainty. And on that, ladies and gentlemen, they failed. They failed.
Now let's take a look at our guy, Lionel Legal. He has even more insight on what Diddy's case should break down to.
Let me do the closing, which is, I think, is a little moot at this particular point. But let me try to explain to a jury why Diddy must walk, maybe will walk, or maybe will have his case overturned on appeal. Okay? I'm going to do this again for the millionth time. It's not because he's a good guy.
Exactly.
Or it's not because he treats women like, or doesn't treat them like dirt. It's not because there might be a couple of them in the midst of his fold who became dependent on him or were demeaned. Or maybe some were threatened, but this is not trafficking. This is not racketeering, and it's not a violation of the Mann Act.
That's what we
said. The
said.
overall strategy is simply this, and this is important to understand. It's debauchery. It's not criminal. It's not federal. That's really the bottom line. This case is about moral depravity. The disapproval, the disgust towards this guy and his lousy lifestyle. It's not about proof of federal crimes proved beyond and to the exclusion of every reasonable doubt. The defense, I hope, convinced the jury that while Diddy may be guilty of excesses and vulgarity and sickness with that stupid attitude and a sick lifestyle, he may have beat the hell out of Cassie, he is not guilty of orchestrating a criminal enterprise or trafficking.
And that's all we've ever been saying. That's all we've ever been saying. Somehow it's got twisted that anybody who even wants to discuss this is pro Diddy in some way. And I find it insulting because it's an insult to the audience's intelligence. You can see how poorly this case has been handled, like in the charging of Sean Diddy Combs. But what we can't get away from is that everybody's response to this has been so just basic and myopic that if they've had some experience in their life, they believe that, of course, this is exactly what's happening in this case. And of course, that person should be sent to jail for the rest of their lives. They cannot intellectually believe that that is where this case in particular deserves to end, to culminate.
Anyone trafficking, not using, not taking advantage of, trafficking. Let's look at the RICO conspiracy. This was not an enterprise. And the predicate acts, oh my God. The best argument for me was there was no enterprise. There was no criminal enterprise. This wasn't the mafia. This wasn't a celebrity traffic group. This was an entourage. It was a posse. It wasn't a crime syndicate. What are they talking about? It was Hugh Hefner. It was this ridiculous, or not so. It was a bunch of people. It's been around. It's not, do you think
that is one of the early comparisons a lot of people put to it? They're like, if Diddy is convicted on this, he would be facing life in prison for what Hugh Hefner did. because there was a lot of wild parties at the Playboy Mansion that people do not talk about. And there was probably even way more illicit activity and illegal activity that was done at that place. So then are we going to now investigate anything that appears like the Playboy situation, Playboy Mansion? That's a slippery slope. And I think it's convenient to do this because Diddy is black. If you don't want to talk about race and you're saying race is not a factor, you might not believe that. Hell, Lionel might not believe that. But we can agree on this fact that Diddy is overcharged no matter what you all say. And that includes everybody on YouTube who seems to scream from the mountaintops that Diddy is done every time they post a video.
Do you think the Manson family was trafficking? Do you think they were an enterprise? Maybe.
Yes.
All of a sudden, they're trying. The only reason they're charging him with trafficking is because they got to get it into federal court, and there is no case for a non-trafficking.
Ooh, he's bringing up some good points, man. The only reason they're charging them with trafficking is because they wanted to take it federal. And we've said in the past that this is politically motivated for whatever reason. We don't have all the details, obviously, but Lionel is breaking this down on the true motives of this case and why it's really unfair.
Form of addressing this particular activity. The alleged acts, the drugs, the sex, the money, the violence, were isolated incidents. This is what I would argue. Not part of a coordinated plan. That's the issue here. That's what's critical. Now, this is the most important. Continuity. Continuity is one of the elements of this. I hope they showed, or maybe for Diddy's, to show that the incidents were episodic, chaotic, not abusive, but not organized, not systematic, choreographed. They weren't a part of an organized system. There wasn't this pattern, this organized pattern, this continuity. You then have to look at maybe perhaps they undermine the notion of the others. You can say that nobody was employed in a criminal network. In essence, there were friends and there were girlfriends, there were staff, and there were trollops and fallen women or whatever you call it. But it was all voluntarily. They were all voluntarily present in the orbit, in his orbit of fame and excess. And let me tell you,
that is the main thing that is obvious here, is that they all wanted to be in Diddy's presence. Everybody wanted to be around a so-called billionaire. Everybody wanted to be in concert with him. They wanted to be around him in proximity, to have access to his wealth. That implies in itself some type of choice. You understand what I'm saying here? Like, you could have left at any time, but why are you around Diddy and participating in these acts if it is so depraved? It's almost like a consent, what it sounds like to me.
yes. And let me tell you something. I'll bet you they threatened people. I bet you they treated this woman like shit. I'll bet you if you go back to the days of the 80s with Eileen Ford and you look at what those supermodels went through, especially those women who came from foreign countries, who didn't know anybody,
tell the truth,
who were made to do cocaine and coffee and couldn't eat, and
right?
Oh my God,
abuses.
You really want to go through all this? I'll bet you if you looked at the gymnastics group, remember Bela Karolyi and those folks,
right?
I'm not saying they're into trafficking, but if you looked carefully at what they went through, you sure as hell would think they were. If under international law, they were bringing underage girls, which is something that we were promised in this case, but we have yet to see in the sensationalization of the charges brought against Diddy.
A lot of these models were 14 years old, 16 years old. A lot of the gymnasts were in that same age range, but it's never talked about what was going on. And there was definitely some inappropriate behavior in there. Some people have gone to jail behind that. So what are we talking about? Is that comparable? They did not get a RICO charge on them. Apply the law fairly.
You believe that what Diddy went through was trafficking. This was a party house. This was, swingers. Hugh Hefner. It's not a racketeering ring.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you look at the whole notion of sex trafficking, remember what we're talking about: force, fraud, or coercion. Force, fraud, or coercion, not inconvenience, not threat. They could have walked out any time they wanted. They never called the police. Nobody called the police. Nobody ever. I don't know about you. But if I'm a part of this thing, I'm going to get out. I'm going to say, hey, listen, you better get over there because they're holding all these women. Nobody. You got to attack the consent and intent part of it. The best argument is that these were adult relationships. They were messy. They were toxic. They were disgusting. They were horrible. Again, perfect maybe for state court. Perfect for lawsuits.
Right.
But they could have left any time. He might have been manipulative. But it's not trafficking. Again, what I'm saying is it's not that I like this guy. Then there's the agency and participation aspect of it. These are criminal. These are legal aspects. The alleged victims remain in relationships, and they took money. They accepted gifts. They traveled by choice. Mm-hmm. There was no commercial sex arrangement. No forced or brokered commercial sex contract. It was intimate.
These people, these workers, were flying to a destination under their own accord. There was no force, no nothing. When they get there, what they do is their own business, right? So how are we trying to make this trafficking of them? Because it's not often that men are even mentioned as trafficking victims, but especially men who have testified to the fact that they were there participating, not under duress. They were there under their own accord. So then when you get into the women, they're in a relationship. They're doing these things to please their partner. That is it. That is all. Do we do things in relationships that we do not want to do at all times? Absolutely. But you 100% have a choice to not do them, to not be a part of some type of weird swingers party. If you so choose. And you can't say it's because I'm getting my $10,000 a month rent paid, because you don't need to live in a $10,000 a month house if you can't afford it.
Wasn't transactional in a legal sense. And they can undermine the force, fraud, the coercion element of it. You got to ask yourself, did the alleged victim ever call the police?
Right.
Were there threats or just power imbalances? I mean, threats. I'm going to kill you. I'm going to send you back to your family. Did the prosecution prove intent to exploit?
Mm-hmm. Mm-mm.
You could argue there was seduction, but there wasn't trafficking. It's a different story.
They've tried to float that idea of seduction, but or seduction or coercion, I believe.
What about transportation for prostitution? The Mann Act violation, white slavery? Look at the intent and the definition. The best argument is that no one was trafficked across state lines or for prostitution. This was a private relationship, not a pimping operation. Attack the definition of prostitution. Was sex offered for money? Or was it a part of a consensual, romantic celebrity lifestyle? Do you know this is going on right now? I mean, do you know what Hollywood is? Do you know what would, if we extended this to other aspects? You can highlight voluntary
Slippery
travel.
slope.
Did the victims, the putative victims, the alleged victims, did they choose to travel for parties, for events, for relationships? Were they told to perform for pay? What was it? You undermine the intent of this. The prosecution's had to prove, and the jury's got to believe that.
And yeah, that's the thing too. I think some people are missing the point that the Mann Act violations focus on the Jane Doe and Cassie. I don't believe there are any charges that are tied to the actual as workers that were there. And they're actually, some of them were present and testified. So the trafficking charges are related to Cassie Ventura and Jane. They were trafficked by force. This is what the prosecution alleges. They were trafficked by force, fraud, or coercion. The government's trafficking charges against Combs, which each carry a sentence between 15 years and life in prison, center on Ventura and Jane. So all those YouTubers that are out there saying, oh, well, you could see they hired workers. That's not what the charges are referring to. They're referring to these two women in specific. That's something I haven't heard in all the coverage of this. So yeah, that's interesting that we've come to that. I'm pretty sure some of the legal experts were aware of that, but I've just heard so many times that the Mann Act or the trafficking has been proven by involving these people flying over state lines. That ain't it. You have to fly Jane or Cassie over these state lines.
That Combs intended to have someone cross state lines for illegal sex work. Prove that beyond a reasonable doubt. Prove it. It's tough. I mean, especially in the celebrity context of it. The argument would be that she traveled for love and fame and whatever it is, not for sale.
Mm-hmm.
And if you weaponize the spectacle,
he wasn't pimping.
The defense can argue that this entire prosecution is political. It's about feeding the media machine. It's about the government turning a sordid individual, private relationship or gossip column into a federal indictment. Don't let the circus part undermine somebody's freedom. Go after the witnesses. Go after the money motive, the publicity, the lawsuits. You could highlight selective prosecution. Why now? Why after several suits? How do you think Cassie or whatever her name is, you think she hasn't been made whole by this? Come on.
$30 million.
Putting him in prison? Again, he's a dirtbag. The feds are turning Hollywood excess into organized crime. That's not justice, that's overkill. And the closing message had to have been this. I hope it was. I wasn't there. You may hate the parties, you may hate the drugs, you may hate the fame, you may hate him and hate everybody about him. But that's not your job. Your job is to decide whether the government proved its case beyond and to the exclusion of every reasonable doubt.
They did not.
Beyond moral certainty. And on that, ladies and gentlemen, they failed. They failed. They failed. And if you're really one of these, MAGA types, or if you're one of these, constitutional types, you better think and you better agree once and for all, that if this Constitution, if this thing means anything, this stupid son of a bitch that everybody hates, and I hate him too. I know I can't stand him, but that this guy, this Diddy, he's not guilty. He's not guilty of this. The same way he wouldn't be guilty of without proving a death, or arson without proving anything was burned. You got what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Good.
And that is it in a nutshell. They have not proven RICO. They have not proven trafficking. All this stuff, all these many, many potholes, which they've lowered the bar to make it easier for conviction. I do not see how a jury at this point could convict him. So I think that is where this lies. And I think that is what we're going to be hearing in the coming weeks, is that, and as mad as it's going to make so many people, but we can't afford to have this happening, because what are we going to do? Every time an NBA player or an NFL player flies a woman out to another state, are we going to have another case this way about trafficking? Are we going to conveniently weaponize RICO charges against people who are unsavory characters? I'm telling you, that's a slippery slope. Everybody wants to talk about, this era of control and how our lives are being censored. And if you're not willing to defend P. Diddy on this, I don't want to hear you on anything else, because some of you all have probably done worse. Anyway, if you like this video, like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell notification for all uploads. This is Fawcett Media.